Hello and welcome to another episode of Taking Back Saturday, a Happy Buyers Club podcast where we break down the real estate market each and every Friday and help home buyers build confidence, follow a process, and hopefully buy really happy. I'm your host, pushing the buttons and asking the questions, Chayse Jones, and joining me as he does each and every day of each and every week, particularly on a Friday here in the podcast studio, is real estate daddy, Sam Hunter. How are you, mate?
Good morning and hello, listeners. I am very well, thank you. Extremely caffeinated.
Nice.
I'm up
High
for
energy.
it. Yep, I'm ready to go.
Everyone's feeling it.
I'm only joining you every second week. It feels like the last few on these podcasts. But hey, that's what you get when you get special guests.
Hey, listen, we're on the up. We changed the intro, and then since then, it's just been the momentum has rolled on.
High fives at open homes. Never for me, only for you.
Hey, and to everyone that is coming and saying g'day at the opens, I appreciate you.
100%.
I'll have some pre-signed autograph cards ready to go for next week. We were going to do a podcast this week. I had intended to do a podcast about selling, selling first or buying first, and because it's a question that we get a lot. But off the back of a post that you put up Saturday afternoon around state of the market, and it's something that we do every Saturday afternoon. Sure. Keep an eye on our Instagram stories for that market wrap every Saturday afternoon. And one particular stat on that Saturday post was with regards to clearance rates. We had a lot of questions about it. So, hey, what better way to answer all those questions than do an entire podcast about it?
For sure. 15 minutes, hopefully, keep us to that promise, listeners, of what's going on in the market. What does the future hold? Yeah, we do at about 10 past 6 on a Saturday evening every week. We put up the Brisbane clearance rates and we put up our thoughts and how they compare. And last Saturday, which would have been the 24th of August, Brisbane had a surprisingly low clearance rate. It was actually what you would call the low end of normal for Brisbane. It was 40%. So 10 properties went to auction, 40 of them, four of them sold. What a great clip this might be if we put this on YouTube.
Snip that up.
Yep. So if there were 10 properties going to auction, 4 of them sold, 6 of them didn't sell for whatever reason. Potentially they sold prior as well, which is an interesting part of that fact. That's the low end of normal for what we would consider to be a normal Brisbane market, but that has been low for the market of the last 12 months, quite significantly. We would be in the high 50s as an average over the last sort of 12 months. And we don't get a lot of responses usually from that post, but we had plenty of people asking, what does that mean?
Is the Brisbane market crashing?
We bought a house today. We're shitting the bed. What does this mean? I think an interesting stat that potentially weighs into some of those thoughts was that Brisbane actually had the lowest clearance rate of capital cities. Which is, again, we're usually second, I would say. There's always somebody, whether it's Sydney or Perth, but Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, Perth, even Hobart, poor old Hobart, and Canberra all had high clearance rates in Brisbane over the weekend. So does that mean the market is crashing? No.
And again, it's all about how those statistics are derived as well. Like you're saying, sales prior, things might have sold 2 hours after the auction. It might have been that auction numbers were particularly low, and all of a sudden you're deriving statistics from a very small pool. But it can also tell us another story as well. If you're wanting to dive deeper into it, is it a case of that agents maybe are a little bit, I don't know how to put it, like they're getting through a campaign and assuming that they're going to get a result without having prepared their sellers accordingly ahead of the big day?
I think good real estate, and this is buying, selling, and real estate agency and buyer's agency to a degree as well. Good real estate involves courage, and it's courage to have really tough, honest conversations. If you're thinking about buying, you've got to have those hard conversations early about what you really want, so you're in agreement. You've got to ask yourself some tough questions about what you are comfortable spending, because the bank will probably give you every penny you can afford. That doesn't necessarily spell stress-free life, right? If you're selling a house, you've got to have really hard conversations about what you're willing to sell it for versus what it's worth, because having sold more properties still than we've ever bought in my career, everybody wants more money for their house, even after they sign a contract and sell it. It's like on the buying side. Everybody wants to buy for less than they paid, even after they've bought it. So you've got to have those courageous conversations. And there is an element of the market's has done the hard work for agents for a long time. Now I think we said this on the podcast before. If for the last sort of 8-9 months the market's been on the autobahn, it's now just on the M1, and in some cases it's on the M1 at that little stretch between between like IKEA and Garden City. If you've ever come home from the coast at like 5:30 on a Saturday,
it's moving.
You're going to get where you want to go. Maybe it just takes a little bit longer, right? We spoke to an agent on Saturday who just sold her own house. And she was frustrated. She's like, took me 7 weeks to sell my own bloody house. But then I had 3 offers on the same day and got more than I wanted, right? Yeah. So she was stuck in that little IKEA stretch for longer than potentially she wanted, but got where she wanted to go. And I think clearance rates, why we share them every Saturday, is they are pretty reflective of the market that day, then and there, and the work that has gone into that market for the 3 or 4 weeks prior, right? And that's from an agency perspective. That's from a new buyer versus frustrated buyer perspective. And yeah, it was a bit of a shock result, I think. And we had agents feedback being like, what do you guys think's going on here?
Yeah.
And that's kind of cool to hear that we're being asked for feedback on the market, I think. Maybe we're doing something right. Maybe it's just real estate agents that listen to this show. Who knows? But we certainly had a few other people who'd either seen us out and about or had found us, stumbled upon us one way or the other, and felt comfortable enough to ask us a question. We love that, right? So more DMs, the better. It doesn't mean the market's crashing. I think it is reflective of a market where buyers feel like they have more choice.
Mm-hmm.
Sellers still feel like their house is worth more than it was yesterday, and potentially they feel like it's worth more than it actually may be. And it is a case of agents, some agents. Let's be clear, right? I genuinely do believe this, and I'm not just saying this because we live and die by the relationships that we have with real estate agents. There are more good ones than bad ones.
100%. By far and away, not a case of a market crashing.
For sure.
And the wording that I think that a lot of agents used with us over the weekend, particularly when they were speaking with me, was, does it feel flat? Does it feel flat? And maybe it is a case of it's flattening, but not to any great extent. And it's more of a case of agents almost reassessing how they're going to get the best result for their vendors.
Correct.
Like, there was a particular place that I went to on Saturday afternoon after we split up, and gorgeous property. Something that it was lined up out the street. The agent who normally was like a real, like, I don't park in the driveway kind of guy, had to park in the driveway. The street was full, absolutely end to end. And the kind of property, like, wow, this is the kind of thing that would fill a backyard for an auction. And yet it's price by negotiation, because I think he's aware that he's probably going to get a better offer this week than having to wind that down for 3-4 weeks, keeping everyone engaged, and hopefully you get that result at the end. So the good agents, like you say, are identifying shifts in the market. They're looking at the same data that we look at and plan ahead for it. Correct?
Yeah, agreed. And they are having those sort of courageous conversations where they're presenting a process to a seller, and if the seller doesn't want to follow it, they're probably not the agent for them. And that's a really good thing, I think. You've got to know where the market is, and that's a really broad and general statement. But if you're selling a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom family home and it's worth mid to late ones, you need to know, are buyers willing to wait 3 weeks, gather in the backyard and put their hand up to fight it out at auction? Or are you going to get a family that's maybe been in the market for 3 or 4 months, holding out for the promise of the spring selling season where more property is going to come to market? And if you're listening to this and you've been in that market for 3 months, I guarantee you there will be real estate agents who will tell you over the next 2 weeks, don't worry, there's more coming, right? And so
there is more coming, right?
Can you hold that interest? And that, can you hold their emotion? Because again, I know the place you're talking about. It was nice. It was beautiful. Light, bright, Palm Springsy. People would have walked in there and gone, holy shit, we should probably buy this.
Yeah.
And so they wanted to give them that opportunity that day.
Yeah. This is what Sam and Chayse are talking about. The right one's presented itself, and now let's move quickly. Let's move confidently, and let's attack this thing today, Saturday afternoon. I bet you that agent that parked in the driveway had a busy Saturday afternoon.
Yeah. Versus another couple of mates of ours bought a property late Saturday afternoon at a 5 p.m. auction, which we said was probably going to play in their favour because it was a bit witching hour for a lot of kids. And we both think that they paid great money for it. And that potentially was a campaign that didn't need to last 3 weeks. Somebody might have jumped on that opportunity early. And this is, I think, what the good agent's recognizing. They've got the skill. Same thing with us. We know, well, at least we hope to know, when we've got to be aggressive versus when we'll let the process play out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do we know as much as we need to know to capitalize on this in this moment? Or what else do we need to understand to make sure that we're positioning this to buy, or I'm more than happy to walk away? And that's the real estate skill. That's the skill that buyers, if you're in the market a really long time, you either buy frustrated or you buy really well because you've learned those skills or you haven't. That's the value, I think, that buyers agents bring to the table, and that is certainly the value that sales agents bring to the table. It's why 99.9% of property is sold with an agent in this country.
Mm.
They can walk you through this process. The good ones can walk you through, no, we're not going to go to auction. We are going to do this. You're going to find a buyer, maybe two. They're going to be emotional about it. Let's not park them and try and park that emotion for 3 weeks. Let's not give them the opportunity to think of all the logic around this. Let's just get a result today. And buyers have got to be wary of that, I think, as well. Like, you walk into a house, you get super emotional about it. You do end up missing some things. So you got to do your homework before you fall in love with it, right?
Mm.
So I think all of those little tweaks that have subtly been happening over the last 6 weeks, I would suggest more properties selling ahead of auction. We know why properties sell before auction. There's either no interest or loose interest, as in big offers. Listen to that podcast from 2 weeks ago if you need more information on that, because it will help you understand the market if you find yourself in that position. So more properties selling prior, more properties being sold by negotiation. There's actually more properties with prices on it now when appropriate, which I think is a really good way of building momentum around it. All of that adds up to a 40% clearance rate. It does not mean that anything other than rock solid consistency is happening in the Brisbane market.
Yeah. And it is a skill for buyers to be able to read the market, particularly like read the market for a particular property of interest to them, but then also bigger picture as well. Like, and that can be down to data surrounding clearance rates, about number of properties selling on any one weekend, but also around like the finance side of things, the economics surrounding it, because we're seeing some interesting stuff happening sort of behind the scenes. And this is really interesting information because it's a means for buyers to either build confidence or identify opportunities for what may be the next 3, 4, 5 months. We're talking about term deposit rates being cut. Variable rates are down. Across most of the major banks are down 0.25%. Is it a case that they're just trying to win back some market share, or is there like maybe bigger things at play?
Yeah, I think you and I were saying before this, when we were writing out these notes, and we do use show notes, this isn't just this amazing conversation that happens back and forth. We were saying we wish we knew as much as we know about finance like today 3 years ago. That would have made a material difference into some of the decisions that we might have made then as well. And it is a case of the minor banks and the major banks all sense that there's not really going to be any change to interest rates for a little bit longer. So how do they make the most out of people's savings, right? Which means they cut the interest rates that they're paying on term deposits. And how do they build their mortgage book as quick as possible while people are still kind of in refinance or purchase mode before potentially there's a rate cut? Now, my view on rate cuts is that it'll happen just before the end of this financial year, so like May, June next year, and it'll be very small, and it'll just be enough to make the Melbourne, Sydney, and Brisbane market go gangbusters again. I really do think. I don't think it's going to have a great effect on Perth and Adelaide. They've got a long way to go. So banks are looking at what can they do now to get ahead of that, to make more money off savings and make more money or build a book of loans now so that when the rates do come, they've got 6 months of high interest rates in the bank.
Yeah.
What does that mean for buyers now? I know it sounds like we talk about the same stuff week in, week out, but it is like, if you are boringly consistent in your real estate process, you end up with a pretty good result. Follow a process, build a lot of confidence, go and make that decision now, because while prices, I believe, will continue to grow steadily, when that rate cut comes, and whether it's 6 months from now, a year from now, 18 months from now, prices will spike again, because all the people that potentially have money in the bank to buy, but don't necessarily have the incomes to repay, well, then suddenly the doors will open for them. And they'll be like, okay, cool, that's going to save me $400 a month on my mortgage. I can actually go and afford that property at 1.5, which then may be worth 1.6.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, what if you've got the capacity to buy now, build some confidence around making those decisions and get into the market sooner rather than later, because you will reap rewards in the short term as well as obviously the long term.
Exactly right. The market's not crashing. The market is steady and will continue to steadily grow for the next, call it 11, 12 months.
For sure.
Foreseeably. And this is, again, just us reading into some deeper data.
Predictions are always dangerous, particularly ones about the future. But, yeah, like we've been around enough market cycles to kind of recognize, like, the markets don't necessarily repeat themselves, but they rhyme. And this one feels like where we've gone through a big spike. There was, depending on where you are in Brisbane, what felt like a correction in mid to late 2022. It's then gone mental again. It's now not slowing because of any other factor than affordability, but there are still enough people with under $2 million to spend that market will continue to bump up gradually, and apartments and units will continue to bump up, whatever the next thing above gradually is, because they're still going a bit nuts. So, yeah, if you've got capacity, find the confidence and make those decisions sooner rather than later. Buy that 7 out of 10, you'll reap the rewards, and you can create the next 1 or 2 points to get it to a 9 or a 10 sooner rather than later.
Yep, there is good properties out there. When you find them, prepare well and get about offering well to take those away from the market.
Just to circle back onto where we first started this, like, I wouldn't expect to see massive bumps in clearance rates. I would expect to see more properties being sold away from auction, certainly for the next 6 weeks. As we come into that sort of warmer weather, spring traditional selling season, agents will want to just capitalize on new interest early. So there'll be a lot of price buy negotiations. There'll be a lot of contact agents or for sales. So ask the right questions, get a feel for value. Ask them what the nearest comparable sale is rather than is there a price guide, so that you can get your head around where the seller's expectations are and what the agent has done to set them, manage them, hopefully not let them run away, so that when you're going to see it at 10:15 on a Saturday with 30 other people, you're the buyer that can make a decision at 10:45 or at 4 o'clock that afternoon and ideally get ahead of the pack before Monday morning.
Yeah, it's a very tough ask, pun intended, to try and get those questions answered at an open home. So try to get that stuff done well ahead of time. Yeah, guys, well, what you can expect from us next week is a podcast about selling. So, yeah, exactly. Who knows what's going to happen this week. But Sam, that's you. That's me. Cue the song.